Okay guys, this is a video about using Visual Studio and the C++ language to connect to the Raspberry Pi and run a remote application. First thing you need to do is make sure that you have a remote setup for your Raspberry Pi 3, or in this case I'm using Raspberry Pi 3. It could be any of the Raspberry Pis actually. So let's go to Tools, let's go to Options, and let's go down to cross-platform. Now if we break that down a little bit and we look at Connection Manager, so you want to get to Connection Manager, and I've already got one set up, but let's go through the process of actually setting one of these up. So we'll click Add, and we'll break out this Connect to Remote System. As you can see, in mine I called it Raspberry Pi, and it may be on yours, it could be a simple IP address, or it could be a named connection. In my case, I'm using the standard port 22. Depends on what your SSH server is on your Raspberry Pi 3. I'm using SSH on my Raspberry Pi 3 with Raspbian OS. So it depends on what your situation is. And then in here you would put your username, and of course in mine it's just Pi. And the default is going to be Pi, I believe, on all of the Raspbian setups. And then you'd put a password in here. Now you can also choose to do it with a private key if you have that set up on your Raspbian or on your Raspberry Pi and your Raspbian OS. In this case I'm using a password, and since I've already created this, I don't need to do it again. And once you tell it to save, you're going to get the setup that you have here, which you can see its host name's Raspberry Pi, ports 22, username, and then it's Raspbian OS, and it's going to say it's an ARM. Now keep in mind that this particular menu that you're looking at here can be initiated like we did through the tools and options, but when you create a brand new project that is going to be used for, in this case, C++ connection, if you don't have a connection already established, it will bring this menu back up, and we'll demonstrate that in just a second when we go back and create a project. So let's cancel this out. We're going to take and remove this so that I can demonstrate the project creating that. And then let's go back, and I'll close this solution out, and let's create a new one. So we're going to create a project, and we're going to choose C++ as the language. We're going to select Linux as the OS, and you can leave that as all project types. You come down here, you have this handy little Raspberry Pi Blink that's part of the Visual Studios. We select Next, and this one we're going to call it Blinky Pi, and then we're going to I'm going to take the defaults on the project folder, and you can do whatever is your defaults on that. So we create that, and you get this handy little getting started page. Now I found that when you close this particular project out and come back, in my case this thing seems to go away. So what I would suggest is that when you come back to it, if you go into the folder, there's an HTML link that will allow you to bring this back up. So you won't lose it. Even though you may look like you're losing it, you don't actually lose it. So let's take a look at the main. This is a C++ program with the wiring Pi setup sys, and it allows you to basically down here digital write to a single pin and turn on and off an LED. I will in a subsequent video show you how to hook up your Raspberry Pi to a breadboard and make a LED blink, but for now we'll just leave this the way it is. So if we go up here and we get ready to do the start, you'll notice that this thing is set up for an ARM, which is the processor that's on a Raspberry Pi, and because we don't have a connection, it says none. So let's click that, and you'll see that the connection that we had just been through is now available to us, and this was done automatically because it knew that it didn't have a connection to a remote computer. So let's put in our previous information. In my case, it's Raspberry Pi port 22 because that's my SSH server. It may be different in your case. And then typical default is Pi for the Raspbian. And then let's go down to and put in a password. And so if you either push return or select connect, then you'll see down at the bottom here that we are starting to do some things in the background to establish a connection to the Raspberry Pi. And we now have a window, a Linux console window, that allows us to see what's going on inside the Raspberry Pi. This means that we have established a connection, so we're done at this particular point. Now, one of the things that is done in the setup is, and let's go to that right now, let's go to setup, or to the project, and let's get properties. So now if we go into the options here, let's take a look at remote post build, and you'll notice here that it has the command line GPI export 17 out. That is basically doing the a GPIO export on pin 17 based on the BCM numbering system. As you see, it's listed up here in the code, and that's not necessary if you do it in software. And I, in a subsequent video, are going to show you how to do this with software so that you don't have to have it in an options setup on your project itself. So that'll be in another video. Having said that, that's pretty much it for this particular video. What we're doing here is I've shown you that you can take your Visual Studio, connect to a Raspberry Pi 3 using C++, and in this particular case we were using WirePi Setup Sys, which is wiring Pi, and using it to turn on and off an LED. And of course, as I said, we'll show in some subsequent videos how to do that, and also how to initiate the GPIO export in software. And that's it for today, guys. Take it easy. We'll talk to you later. Bye.